All right, so uh, we're going to start from where we stopped last time. You still remember we started with our CSS. What we talked about? We talked about how you can include CSS on the page, and we talked about different methods that you can use. So we talked about the inline method, embedded method, and the external method. And apart from that, we dive into our selector because I mentioned in that day that when you are dealing with CSS, which is using the embedded or the external CSS, you always deal with what we call CSS rule set. And what is rule set? Rule set is a combination of selector and along with the declaration that you want to apply. What is the rule set? We have selector under it and we have the declaration. So the selector is what you use to target the element on the screen, because when you're dealing with embedded or external, you are not really working with any particular element. You are creating your style. So how do you talk to CSS to apply your style on particular element? So we need to give it some guide on how to apply or where to apply the style. And as you can see here from my this external CSS, there is no HTML here. So how do we talk to the browser that particular element on the page, oh, we want you to give you this so stuff? That's where this selector comes in there. But what do you want to apply on that element? That's the declaration, and this is what we call rule set. But I told you that this selector is very important because whatever stuff you want to apply on the element, if the browser cannot find that element or if CSS cannot find the element on the page, then whatever you are doing here is useless there like that. And that's the reason why we started with our selector, where we talked about the basic one. Today we're going to continue from there by talking about these combinatory selectors. So we talked about this type, the class, the ID, the attributes, and the universal selector. And let me go over them quickly. So for the type selector, what that one means is that you are selecting based on the element name. For example, we want to select all the P or all the A. That's why now is only talking about the type A. It doesn't care about any other element on the screen there. For example, here, all the A on my screen, the color should be red. So this A here is what we call the selector. The color and this red here is what we call declaration. But under the declaration, you know that you have the property name and you have the value for that property. And as you can see the pattern here, you have the property followed by the column, followed by the value, and followed by the semicolon there. And you can have multiple declaration there because you'll be applying a lot of things or you'll be changing some stuff on your element. For example, here now the background is going to be yellow. So all the A tag on the page, we want the colors to be red and we want the background to be yellow. But I mentioned something that day that just because this your selector is valid in CSS doesn't mean it's valid on the page. If you don't have any A on the page, you know that all these things, they are useless, because the only time it will apply this stuff is when it can find this A on the page. If the thing is not on that page, it's useless. Nothing will happen at all. And if you scroll up and down, as you can see, we have these three A tag there, and that's the reason why we are seeing the style. But now imagine I change this thing from this one and I'm using another kind of element here, which you can use for inline grouping that we talked about at the grouping there. As you can see, do I have anything like span here? You can see nothing is happening there. Even though this is a valid selector inside your CSS, but it's not valid on the page because you don't have any element like this. And when you're talking to CSS is that only look for span. That's the only type you are looking for. Nothing concern you about any other type on the page. And that's where we now have this kind of a other selector here, which can allow you to select different elements, but based on their class or based on the ID or any other attributes that you want to select on that element. So for the class, that one means that somewhere on the page, there's a particular class on your element. So this is the attribute class, and this is the class that you are giving to that element. I know I told you we have ID, we have a class. Both of them want to, like, it look like they are doing the same thing, but technically they are not. So we use ID to uniquely identify a particular element on the page, and you can use class to group bunch of elements together, as if just like the way we are in this class now, we are like three. It's not just one person that is inside the class. So we all belong to the class. So the same thing too, you can do it with your element, where you can have different element on the page, but this element that you have on the page, you can, oh, you belong to this class, you too, you belong to that class, and so forth like that. And how do you give your element class? You just go to the element, give it the attribute class, and you supply the name of the class that you want to use. So if you look at it at this line 57, this element is having class list item, and at the same time on line 67, the OL is having that class. So which means these two elements now, you can style them based on the class. You don't need to use their name. You just mention the class that they belong to, and any element that belongs to that class will have the style that you put on the class. The same thing too, you can style your element based on ID. But I mentioned it that when you are dealing with ID, it should always be unique on the page. So since this one now, this H2 is having heading 2, no other element on this page must have this ID again. If you do it, the browser will still interpret it for you, but you are going to be seeing some side effect that you don't want when you are using the ID later on there like that. So ID should always be unique on the page. So if you give one element a particular ID, that name, you can't use it again for another element on the page. You can give other element the ID too, but the text must be different. Whatever text you are using must be different. But for class, one element can belong to multiple classes, which is what you see here. So this li here is belonging to class open, and at the same time is belonging to this class list item. And I can target, or I can style the element based on the class. So if you want to style the element based on the class, no, I said it that you are going to start with dots, then followed by whatever the name of the class you are looking for. So here now, we want to style any element that belongs to this particular class open. And once this thing is saved, as you can see, even though they are not the same element, this is H2, this is OL there. So even though they are not the same thing, but I was still able to style them at the same time. Why? Because they have the same class on them. So this is class open here. You can see this LI is having class open, and this H2 is having class open. And since they belong to the same class, then they will have the style for that class. So if it is the list item too, you see that only those ones that have this particular class, you see that this one too is still being styled because it's belonging to two classes, not just this open alone. It's belonging to both open and list item, and that's why we are still seeing it. But now, as you can see, this one now is no more, like, it's not styled again because it's only belonging to this open alone. And since we are not doing anything with open, then nothing will happen with it there like that. And for the ID, to style an element based on its ID, you start with the hash, then followed by whatever the ID of the element. So if I put heading 1 here and save, if you check, there is nothing like that on the page. We don't have anything like ID heading 1. But if I change it from 1 to 2, you see that only one element is going to be highlighted on the page because that's the only element that have that ID. And you know the ID is always unique there. So when you're dealing with ID, whatever ID you're giving the element, make sure that other element is not having it on that page there. So that's just the rules for ID. But for class, you can give any element same class, or one element can have multiple classes, because class is really, really useful, and you'll be seeing it a lot later on there because it's versatile and kind of good for what you be doing later on, because most of the elements you want to style, they are having the same style. So instead of you mentioning them separately, you just give them the same class, and whatever you are doing on that class, it will affect all of them, whether they are of the same type or they are not of the same type. The other one that we talked about is attribute selector, which allows you to select based on the other attributes. You know, we talked about how to select class attributes and how to select ID attribute. But now imagine you have other attribute that you want to target, like this type now. There is no special way of styling based on this attribute type, or based on this attribute 4, or based on this attribute placeholder, or based on this attribute value. Yeah. So how do you target element based on these other attributes apart from class and ID? Then you can use this style here, which is this square bracket, and you're going to mention the attributes you are looking for there. For example, like this, anywhere there is a attribute value, I want you to style the element with this particular stuff. So save now. As you can see, nothing is happening here because it will only apply it on the element that have that particular attribute. And since it's only this one that have that attribute, that's the reason why we are seeing it there. But what if I use type? So any element that have this attribute is going to target all of them. But now I don't want to target all of them. I only want to target the password. So here you can specify the value. This one doesn't care about the value. As long as that attribute is here, it will target the element. But what if you care about the value too? Then you just pass the value the way it's being used on the page. So here we are looking for any element that have these attributes type, and the value there is password. So if this one is saved now, as you can see, this is the only one that satisfies the condition. This is the only one that passed through, because this one have the type, it have, but the value are not the same thing, so it will not work. So the only time it will work is when this attribute is there and the value is like this. If I save, nothing will happen because there is no element that have this particular stuff on the page there like that. But now if I use submit, I think we have this one. Yeah, so as you can see, it's there like that. Or I can use text, which is going to select these two because that's what we have on them. And this is where we kind of stop last time. So today we're going to continue from there by talking about this other selector that we have there, which is very important. You always use this child selector, the type, the class, and this most of them, this type, class, and child, you always use them a lot. So this child is very important that you understand the stuff, because here now we are selecting different p tag on a page. But what if I want to select one element that is inside another element? That's where we have the child selector. I don't just want to select all the p. I only want to select only the p that is inside form, or I only want to select only the form that is inside div, not just any element. Because if you just use this stuff like this, so if you use the stuff like this, so anytime you use something like this, what you are saying here is that you want to select all the p on the page, and the color should be red, then the background should be this yellow. So save, and go back up and down. Anywhere we have p, as you can see, it's going to target all of them. But this is not what I want. This is not what I want. What I want to do is to only select the p that we have inside form. So for example, here now I have this p. So p tag inside, not page, tag inside form lorem 20 to just generate some dummy text. So save it, and now as you can see, we have the p tag inside form. But it's not just the one that is inside form that is selecting there. It's selecting all the p, because anytime you do it like this, it will select all of them. That's what you are saying. You are not putting any condition apart from that element alone. But this is not what I want. Again, what I want is I only want to select the one that I can find inside the form, or that you can find inside any other element that you want there. And how do you do this? So in order for this thing to work, this is the pattern, because everything in selector is just pattern there. You know, when you are dealing with class, is dots. When you're dealing with ID, is hash. So when you're dealing with child selector, it's going to be like this. So parent is going to be parent like this, and after that you are going to have the child selector. So this parent doesn't need to be element. It can be other type of selector that we've used before. So it can be class. So let me call it parent selector like this. So let me call it parent selector, and here you're going to have the child selector. So this one doesn't need to be form, or you can use anything to target form, but the parent will always be by this side, followed by space, then followed by the whatever selector you want to use to select the child. And what does this thing, what is it going to do for you? What this thing will do is that we want to select this child if and only if it is inside this particular parent. For example, here now, I want to select div that is inside form. It's not the same thing as this one. Both of them are not the same. This one is selecting div that is inside form, Why this one is selecting form that is inside div. What you are selecting is always on the rightmost side. Wherever on the rightmost, that's what you are selecting, but it must be inside what you have on the left of it. So because this thing can go more than this, not just one. You can have it like this. Where you have this, you have form and you have p. So it doesn't need to be just two. It can be more than this depending on what you're selecting. But what you're actually selecting is always on the right. The last one is what you're selecting, but the element must always be inside what you have on the left. Kajiko. So this one now, the translation here is that you want to select div, as you can see, that is inside form. But if you check this one now, you see that the element is different. This one now, I want to select form that is inside div. But this one now, we want to select p that is inside form. And form too is inside div. You always move from right backward. So what you actually want to select, what you want to select is p, only p. Not like it's not selecting all this thing, but you're using this one as a condition in order for it to target this your p. So in order for this thing to work, in order for you to select this p, it must be inside form, and that form too must be inside div, which is not the same thing as this. So here, if I have form, div, and p, they are not the same thing, because this one now is looking for p that is inside div, and div too is inside form. You always move from right back or there like that. But what you're actually selecting is always on the right. The last element on the right is what you are selecting, but it must be inside what you have on the left side there. So what do we say we want to do here? So in order for us to be able to have what we want to do, now, we said we want to select what? P that is inside form. So which means before this P, we're supposed to use form. So now, it's not going to target all the P again on the screen. It will only target all the P that is inside form. So if the P is not inside form, it will not, can you see now? It's not selecting all this one again. It will only select the one it can find inside the form. So this one allows you, because you'll be doing this in a lot later on, because it's not every time you just want to select all the air at once. You only want to select the one that is inside a particular element. Because when you are doing your styling, even though on the page you are using a particular button, but there's some time that the styling of that button will be different from the one that is outside of where it's being used. So you need to be able to target only that one, not everything that you have on the page are there like that. And that's the reason why this selector is very, very important there, that because it will make life easier for you when you are targeting your element. And please, this thing is not just for this. Can you see that I'm using my type selector? You can combine every other type of selector that we've talked about together. And that's the reason why we call it combinatory, because you are combining the basic selector that we know together to form a larger or a complex selector there. If you just mention form here, it will only select form. If you mention only P, it will only select P. But once you combine the two of them together, then you are doing something else, which is known as child selector. So here we can do something like this by saying I'm looking for A here, but I'm not just looking for any A. I want the A that is inside div. So which means before you type A, we need to have div, and after the div, that's where we now have the A. So this one will only look for A that is inside the div. So how do I select the P now? That is or how do I select H1 that is inside section now? So how do I select H1 that is inside section? So what do I need to type in order for me to have that selector? So how do I so that's just it. So this one now, it will only target H1 that is inside section. So what is the translation for this? So I have this open, and I have this item. So what is this one going to select there? So what this one want to say is not just item. You need to try, like, for someone that doesn't know what that dot is in, have to, you have to explain it in a broad time, not the way it's being typed. So this one now, we want to select any element that have class item, but it is inside another element that have class open. So this is the, can you see here? Can you see what I type here? But now this thing has translated the stuff. to a proper, even though it's still not English, but that's how to um, pronounce the stuff. So here now, what it means is that we want to select any element. See that any element that have class what item, but that item or that element must belong to, or it must be inside another element with class open. So what about this one? Uh okay, and I have this. So what does it mean? What is the? Can you translate this one now? Should be able to translate this one now. So what is that? What are we selecting? And what are we selecting? What are we selecting here on this line? Eh? So uh so what this thing is saying is that we want to select H1, but not just any H1. That H1 must be inside span, and span 2 must be inside any element that have this particular ID heading 2. That's just it. So that's how it works. So anytime you see something like this, it is known as child selector. So you only want to select what is on the right. The rightmost stuff you have there is what you want to select, but it must be inside everything that you have on the left side. So once you see anything like this in a code, just know that you are selecting the last one there, but it must be inside everything you have on the left of it, like that. And this is what we call child selector. And you're going to see later on when we are using, because when I'm started using it, I won't be mentioning their name again. I will just bring them out, and based on what I type, you should know what it's going on there. And that's why I'm explaining them right now, so that when they are being used, when you get to the time they are being used, to not look as if we are doing one Chinese stuff. All right, so which other selector do we have on the list? Now we just finish this our child selector. So the other one we have is this all selector. So what is all selector? That's not about the child. This is just the basic. We talk about the basic one, but I don't want to do the other direct one because we don't need it now. The time we need it, I'm going to explain the stuff. So I'll move directly to this all. And what is this all? This all is really useful when you need to have different selector, but they are using the same declarations. You want to have different selector, but they are using the same declaration. Here now, if I select the P, inside the P, I have color to be yellow, and I have the background to be red. This is I'm done with P. But the same thing I'm doing with this P now, I want to do with another element, for example, like A. So now I have color to be yellow, and background to be red. You can see that what I'm doing with this A is still the same thing that I'm doing with the P. So instead of me repeating myself like this, I can actually share this thing between P and A. And that's where this all selector comes in. Because this is one selector on its own, and this is another selector. And they are not even talking to the same element. They might be talking to the same element, but right now they are not talking to the same element. They are different selector. So, and those selector that you want to use, they want to share the same declarations. So when you want to do that, all selector is your friend if they're not using class. Another way of solving this problem is by just going to those elements and give them class. But now we don't want to use class. We want to, even if you are using class, imagine that you select one element in one place and you need to use another kind of a selector, but they are reusing the same style and you can't even give them the same class. So what do you have to do? What you have to do is to use this or selector there. And this is what I normally tell my students. For every crazy selector that you have, there's always a simple way of doing the same thing. So you might want to use complex stuff to impress people, but or to even do some stuff. But that's big stuff that you're doing on that big selector that you're combining together. There's always a simple way of doing that same thing. Almost all the time, but there's some edge cases that it will not work, that you have to use that complex stuff. But most of the time, there's always a simple way of representing a complex selector there. So, and that's what we want to do here too. So instead of us doing it like this, and start repeating ourselves, we can combine the two of them together on one line. And how do you do that? So to do your all selector, this is just what it means. So you are going to have the selector one, comma, that's the operator there. Once you have comma there, then this same means that this one now is a separate selector from this other one here. They might be targeting the same element or different element. It doesn't care. But what this one means is that this is a separate selector. This is another selector. But the two of them, or three of them, or four of them, depending on the number of selectors you have there, are going to be sharing this same declaration you have it. So instead of us having this stuff like this, so what we can do is to combine them together by just copying this one. From there, here, I will have the P, comma, A. So we are selecting P or you are selecting A. And none of them, like the two of them are not affecting each other. So if you can find P, do this. If you can find A, do this. If you cannot find any one of them, then nothing will happen. But just because you are not finding P doesn't mean it will not still work on A. It will work on them separately. That's why we say or. Is that this one or this one or that one or this one, all of them together? You can find the stuff on the page like that. So paste this one now. What did I copy? What is it copy? Remove this. Remove VS Code. What are you doing? Remove this. So save. So this is what we call all selector here. But don't forget, it doesn't need to be type selector that you're using alone. You can combine it with other selector. For example, here now, what I want to do, I'm looking for item. So I'm looking for this one. Let's just say div. So what am I doing? Is either this P, or if you can find this A, or you can find div that is inside what class item. So any where you can find any one of these stuff, just apply this stuff. And if you cannot find A, that doesn't mean you should stop. Go and check for A. So if you see A, perform whatever you need to do with it and go, then go to the next one too. Because it will keep selecting them one by one. So check for P. Is it there? Okay, it is there. It will apply this. But if it's not there, then it will not apply anything for that P. Then it will go to the next one, which is A. Are you on the page? So yeah, we can find you. It will apply this. Okay, the next one, what's the next selector? It is div that is inside item. Are you on the page? Yes. Okay, the color will be this and the background will be that. And if you save down, if you have P on the screen, as you can see, it will apply it. And at the same time, it will apply it on the A. So this one is really useful when you have different selectors, but they are reusing the same thing. And you don't want to use the same name for them because creating name for class is hard. Because you need to use a name that is well descriptive. Because when you are reading the code, from the name of the class, you should be able to know what is going on with that class. For example, now if I go to some of this site, if they are not using some processing stuff, you see that the name of their classes, some of them are meaning, like they have meaning according to where they are being used are there. For example, now let's go to this GG and check some of their classes. So when you are using a class, in other place, that naming might not be okay for that place. So you need to create another class for that one. But you want them to reuse this, like you want them to use the same declaration. What do? You just mention those classes, you separate them with all, with comma there, and it will form the all selector for you. And from there, it will apply whatever you want the thing to apply there. But when you're using some processing stuff, the name will not be okay because you are not the one that type. But can you see this one? Can you see the name? B top stuff. Let me remove this item so that you can see the name. As you can see, B top selection text. Because when you are creating page, you should always use, and as you can see, that is the same class that is on. See this, that is the second one. This is the third one, and this is the fourth one. But if you look at all of them, can you see that they have the same class? So you only do it once, and anywhere you put that class, all of them will have the same style. But there's sometimes that the class might not follow what you are doing, but you still want it to have that class, or you still want it to have that style. You just use it all. Can you see this one now? B advert. So you always use a descriptive name for your class, not just putting X. If you put X or Y or A, it will work. Or if you put random text, it will work. The browser will understand. But you that want to be reading the code later on, after you like this month now, you completed a particular project. Now come back around 5 months, you now be looking at this stuff. Am I the one that actually write it? So you start cracking your brain again that what am I doing here? But through the name, if you just see the name alone, you know that as you can see, yeah, based on this name, you know that they are dealing with advert stuff there because that name is telling you what the class is or where it's being used there like that. You don't even need to see where it's being used. Based on that name, you already know what is going on. But nothing concern the browser about the name you are using. You can use any text you want for your class. But as a developer, you should always use a good name so that when you are working with other people or you yourself, when you come back later on, you don't start looking for what is going on. But it's not every time that you do all these things because when you're using some processing stuff, the name might not come the way you were expecting. Like if you're not the one typing the name yourself, it will not work like that. For example, like this side, even though we are still putting some name, like some of our text there, but the browser will still generate some random stuff because we are using some stuff to processing our CSS. Don't forget later on, we'll be dealing with framework, which is going to simplify a lot of things for you. So some of this framework, they have some tooling they've set up that can process a lot of things for you on the fly. And if I inspect this one now, you see what I'm using there. You see that there's some random, can you see? So the login user screen, then the T1 or the text one, but you see that some random stuff that was generated. I'm not the one that typed all this one. The only thing I just typed is this, and this is not even the way I type it, but the stuff process the stuff behind the scene and like that. And if you check this one too, you see, can you see the alt banner left, then the wrapper, but that's not the way I combine them. But the tooling convert everything and but if you see it from the name itself, you know what is going on. So you always name your class very well, but you can use anything you want. Nothing concern the browser or CSS about what you are using. You can use any text that you want. It will accept it, but you as developer that will be reading the code, it will start looking somehow to you later on when you come back into the code and started looking for what is this X, what is this thing actually doing. So you have to go back to the code and start looking for what you actually do last 6 months or 4 months because you are not using a descriptive class there. So and that's why you see that all my class name, they are kind of they have meaning. They are meaning like all the item, heading two. Anytime I'm creating all these classes, you always see that the name is not just any random name. There's something that is representing, as you can list item and so forth like that. So you always use a descriptive name, but the browser doesn't care or the CSS doesn't care. If you like, instead of calling this one item, you can call it XY or X. As long as the browser can find it on the screen, it will understand what is going on. But to you, later on when you come back to the code, you start looking for what's the reason why am I using data XY? So what's the reason for this XY? So that's why you need to use a good name. It's not a must for now that you'll be doing it like that. You can be using anything you want. But as a developer, you need to know how to use a good name. And it's not something that is simple like that. So see, naming things is really hard compared to you coding itself because you have to start thinking about the naming. How do you represent the stuff on that page? But for now, don't worry yourself about that. It's part of what you are here to learn. So when we started working on a redesign, you see how I'm bringing out the name. Based on that, too, when you see something like, oh, let me to use this name for display because it's looking like this particular action that the stuff is carrying out there. So that's how this thing works. So we have the child selector, we have this all selector, and we now have this and selector. Even though this one used to look somehow to people, but it's still useful in some places are there like that. So it's still useful in some places. And what is this one? So what is this and selector? The and selector is really useful when you need to combine multiple selectors together on one element. When you need to combine multiple selectors together on one element, that's where the and selector comes in. Now when you say oh yeah, this thing doesn't need to, like, they don't need to be related to each other and they're not even talking to one element. But when you're talking about the and, you are applying multiple selectors, but it's still on one element. And all these selectors must be true. All of them must be true before you to apply your declaration. So for example, here, I want to select You know what we have been doing before for this our type selector. What I just do is type text like this. No, I did not mention whether it is the input that I'm looking for or it is a button that have that stuff. No, I did not mention that I'm looking for any element that have this attribute type. What I just do here, so if you just do like this and you give it a background, so if you give it a background of a yellow like this and save. So go back to the page and check it. Can you see? It will select all of them that have this attribute. But I did not talk to it that I want the input one or I want the one that is button. Let me give my button to add because you can actually give it to the button too. So here now, let me give it to the button by using type submit like this. So save, you see that it will start the button too. But now it's picking input and is picking button. That's not what I want. I only want it to pick the one that is coming from input, not the one that is coming from button. So you can see now, you must have this, and at the same time, it must be input. That's where the and comes in. And how do you do and? And is really useful where I just mentioned that. But how do you do it? So talk about that one. You are going to have your selector like this, then followed by another selector without space. This is how the and work. But when you are dealing with this one, this second selector here, you can't combine two type selector together to do this kind of an and. So it must be between and it must be between every other selector. This is what I'm trying to say here. You can't have, no, this thing doesn't make sense. You're looking for PP like this. No, it doesn't make sense. So you can't use it between two type like this because you know it's just one P now. That's what you say you're looking for P. You know it will treat this one and something else. But something like this is valid. So I'm looking for P, then dot item like this. Please look at it. You see that there is no space. The two of them are not the same thing. Here now, this P, these two are not the same thing. This is what we talked about before. The all RBD's child selector. Once there is space there, this is what we call child selector. But if there is no space, this is what we call and selector. Because you are talking to one element, just that you are applying multiple conditions there. So what this one is saying, what this line 129 is saying here, we are looking for P, but not just any P. It must have this particular class item. Look at it and I see that they are not the same. This one is talking about two. This one is dealing with two elements, but this first one is dealing with what? One element. When there is no space, that is and. When there is space, that is child. This is there is space there now. That's the reason why it is child. But once there is no space, that's and again too, you see the pattern is coming. So the type selector will come first, then followed by every other selector that you know before like that. You can't do like you now be doing like this. No, it's not making sense. No, you to think P is part of the stuff like that because this one doesn't make sense. Because you think P, but if you do it like this, if you know that the type selector is going to be part of that your hand, it must always come first, then followed by every other one. So it can be like ID one like this, it can be like a class like this, or it can be like this attribute like this. But it doesn't need to be like this alone too. If you want, it cannot be this item, then so you know now when you are dealing with other type, you can combine any one of them. These two are the same. So whether you do class dot item or item dot class, they are the same because the order doesn't matter. But when you are dealing with the type selector, it must always come first. Anytime the type selector is part of your hand, it must always come first. If it doesn't come first, the browser will be thinking of something else. So that's it's just pattern. Once you know the pattern, that's just all. So if you look at this one now, it doesn't care whether you see this one and you see they stay on the same element that you are talking about. So you are looking for this one saying we're looking for any element that have this particular class, and at the same time it have this class. The two class must be there before it will accept it. And this is what we call the and selector, which is what we can use here for this sample that I want to do here. So what do we want to do? What we want to do here is that we want to select input that have what? This particular attribute. And you know, based on what I just explained now, we need to put what here? We need to put input at this place. And this what I'm using here is known as and selector. So we are looking for input, but not just any input. It must have this particular attribute. So if you save down, you see that it's selecting them, but now this button is no more there because one of the condition is not met there. There are two conditions here. The first condition is that it must be input. The second condition is that it must have the, don't forget there are two selector there, but you combine them together to form a single selector. And the one you are using is what we call and. When there is no space, it is known as and. But if there is space, you know that you are talking about something else entirely. Because what you are doing here is that when you do it like this, you know, it will not even target any input. Because what you are doing here is that you only want to target any element that have that attribute type, but it is inside input. And you know that you cannot put anything inside input. It's not possible because input is only self-closing tag. If you look at it on the HTML page, you see that at the end of the stuff, it always closes itself. So you cannot put anything inside it. The only time you'll be using child selector is when you have element that you can put something in between the opening and the closing tag. That's the only time the child selector is useful. But if you are dealing with element that you cannot put anything inside it, no, child selector is useless because no child is doesn't accept any child like anything. So now if you save this one now, as you can see, it's not working again because we are not selecting input. What we are selecting is always on the right side, not what we have on the left. But in order for you to target the input and at the same time apply another condition, then you have to join the two of them together without space. Once there is no space there, it means you are talking about whatever you have on the left, but it must satisfy other conditions that you have on the right side. What you are selecting is on the left, but it must always satisfy all the conditions you have on the all of them must be satisfied. If you have 10 conditions and 9 are satisfied, the only one is not, then none of them will work. That's the and is not like it's not like the other. It can be any one of them, but this one, if you apply 3 conditions on the element that it must satisfy and it already satisfied 2, remaining 1 or 1 is not met, then none of them will work. It will skip it. The only time it will apply it is when the 2 condition, 3 condition, 4 conditions, 5 and so forth like that you apply on the element is going to work. So if you save this one now, as you can see, it's working here, but it did not work on the button. Why? Because the button is not satisfying the 2 conditions. It is not satisfying this input, but it actually satisfies this type. Because when you are using type alone, now you see that it will match the button too. But because you add another condition to it that must be met. So since the 2 did not work on that button, then it will not apply. The only one that matches the 2 conditions is what is going to. So and again too, you can actually do it too for this one, and you can see now that it's not working for the other one. Those one too, they match this one, but they did not match button because they are not button at all. So it did not work. And you can do it like this too. For example, we have item. Inside the items, I'm looking for item like this. And don't forget, this one now is child selector. But this is not what I want. What I want here is this one. I'm looking for elements that have that particular class items, and at the same time, it have a class item without S. Or let me use another thing entirely, which is going to be odd like this, not. So I'm looking for any elements that have class item and at the same time it have class odd. Can you see? The 2 of them are on the same line. But if there is a space in between them, you know, that is something else. Now you are looking for only odd, but it must be inside item. Please don't mix them. So when there is space, that's child. When there is no space, that's and. You are talking about one element at that point. And if I want to, I can still go forward by just putting this P here. So you can, all those your selector, you can combine them together. That's why it is combinatory. You'll be combining them together to select what you have on the page. And how are you going to know which one to use? It all depends on how you arrange your content on the screen. And that's why I'm explaining everything. So that when we are dealing with different content, you know which one to pick. And I'll still show you because you need to see how to put all these elements together. Then when you put them together, you need to know how to start targeting them on the page. So I can't just say this is the one you use. It all depends on how you arrange the content. So based on the way you arrange the content, then you'll be creating selector that matches the content on the page. So it's only the page that determine what you'll be doing in your CSS. So if the elements are like placed inside each other, then you create the selector that will target that element that you are looking for. Not that you always do it the same way every time. No, you'll be using them together. So if you like, you can do this, or you can do this, or you can do any one of the one we talked about. It all depends on how you are targeting the, or how you arrange your element on the page. But the major thing that you should be able to translate the stuff, because here now we are looking for odd elements or the class, but it is IP, but not just any P too. It must have this particular class. So in order for this thing to work, all these conditions. So what we are looking for here, so let me use color blue like this, and the background should be yellow. Nothing will happen on the page because I know that I don't have any element arranged like this. So if you scroll up or scroll down, you will never see anything. This thing will never match anything on the page. So you don't just create your selector anyhow. You create it based on what you have on the page. Because if you use anything here and if it can't find it on the page, as you can see, no blue background. So in order for this thing to work, in our HTML, you must have something that matches that stuff. And how we're going to match, what's the stuff looking for? So the stuff there is looking for any element with class odd, but it's inside P element that have class item. So, which means on the page, we need to have something like this. We need to have class P with item, and inside it, any element that have what? Odd. We don't care whether it is P or H1 or anything. As long as that element is having class odd, it will select it. So here, we can have this lorem stuff. So lorem 35. If I save it, nothing will still happen because I don't have any odd yet. So if I save and go back to the page, as you can see, nothing is happening. So there must be one element here somewhere, and that element is having class odd. So now save it. Can you see now? It will now work. So we are looking for class odd, or we are looking for any element with class odd, but it is inside P that have class item. Even if this element did not have item or the spelling is different, it still not work, because now the selector are not the same thing again. So look at it now. What this one is looking for is odd, that is inside P, but that P have class item. But the one we actually have on the screen is the item with S. So they are not the same thing. So in order for this thing to work, then that means in our CSS, we need to make sure that this thing matches what we actually have on the page. Now it will now work. Again, if you go back to the page and if the class is not there, maybe it's not the ID, it will not work. But that's not what we are looking for. We are not looking for ID. Even though the name is like the name there is, but what we are looking for is not it. It will not work. Because what we are looking for in the CSS is class, not ID, not the P that have that ID. So in order for this thing to work, then what do? You update the selector, because you know that this is how we select ID. Now, if you save it, see, it will work. So you always combine your selector together based on the way you arrange the content on the page. Not that you just mention them anyhow. You don't just mention. The way we are going to be doing later on, we arrange the HTML first, and when we are done with the arrangement of HTML, then we'll now come to CSS and start targeting all the elements one by one, then apply whatever CSS we need to apply on the element there. And that's what we always do when we are done with the properties later on there. So let's continue with the other selector that we have there, which is we are technically done with the day in day out selector that you always use, like the most used selector that you'll be interacting with there. We've talked about them like that, but you need to know how to combine them together to use them, and that's they are the basic one that you need, or the one that you always use every time. I like that. But we still have some other crazy selectors that you can, for example, now, what if I want to select the first of that type, not the second one? No, every since I've been saying select all, select all, select all, because that's how they work by default. It don't give you the first one or the second one or the third one. So they will give you everything that it can find. So this one now is looking for all the elements that have class odd that is inside this P. So it's not just looking for the first one or the second one or the third one. It's not looking for that. So if I bring this thing back now, so let me move this one up. so that we can still use it for this other selector that I want to bring like that. So save, scroll back down, then go back to that page. The same thing we have here now. Let's go down, testing, then another, it doesn't need to be span. The one, it can be I, because we did not mention the element we are looking for, but that class is what we are after. So here can be odd too. So italic text here and there. So save like this. And can you see that it's targeting this one too? So it's not just the first one. It will look for all the odd class that is here, that is inside this particular P with the ID item. But what if it's only the last one you need, or the first one, or the second one? Not all of them. You only need, because like sometimes you have a list of all these items, but you only want to target one of them. And that's where all these other extra selectors now comes in. But by default, whatever selector you are using is selecting all of them that is it that you can find. Any one of them you can find, that's what you to target. But we don't want it like that. We only want to select the first, the last, or the ends just mean, because it gives you the way of selecting the first and the last. But it's not giving you the way to select second, third. So you have to mention the one you are looking for, and that's where this ends comes in. So like that. So let's see. Let's start with these pseudo selectors here. And under this pseudo selector, we have the states. So what is state? It's your element can change from one state to another state. And we have different states that you can listen for on your element. And the most used one here are these two, which is this over or this focus. And when do you say your element is focused? Your element will be focused anytime you move on top of that element. Anytime your mouse is on top of that element, we said it is over. So it will give you that state at that point. And that's the one you see that let me go to where this thing is being used, because it depends on what you are doing with your design. Let me see, do we use it there? Nah, we not technically use it, but I will come into this input. Let me go to DGG like that. So let me see where it's being used. They use the stuff here too. Let me expand this stuff very well. Can you see that something is happening? So this is what we call over here. So you can see that the style change. So when the element enter the over state, you want to apply another kind of a style on that element there like that. Can you see this text too? See that it look like, can you see, when you are inside, see that the color of the text is green, but when you are now outside, the color is another thing. So this is what we call over. So when you're on top of that element, you want something to happen. And when you are not on top of that element, you want like it to just go back to your default styling. The default styling you have there is what it's going to use. But once you move inside, you can tell it to change the style when it is in over state. This is what we call over state. Now we are hovering on that particular element. As long as you are inside it anywhere, it doesn't mean whether it is up or down. As long as you are somewhere inside that box, it will trigger the over state. So, and once you leave, then it will remove that state from the element. So when do you get focus? Focus is useful when you are dealing with input. So that's where you see the focus being used like that. So for example, now look at the box. So when you're not typing, even though they are not using it on the because it depends on what the site want to do. But let me see it from here. They are not using it here too. What I was expecting them to do is that when you inside, it will change the color or the line to another color like that, which is something we are using here like that. So if you click inside the box, can you see that the color change to something else like that? So once you leave, you see that you go back to another color, even though this one is showing the error like that. But if I type now, oh, this is not a valid email. Let me type something, and you leave. As you can see that the color is different. This one is showing like a gradient when you are outside, but once it's inside, it's just a normal green color. So what we are using here is known as a focus, because it will go to that state anytime you are inside the box, like you are focusing on that particular element. So the same thing here too, if you look at this design like that, it's something you can change the style when you are over on the stuff. We have some other states too, but these are the most used states that you only see on different websites like that being used. So most of the over state, you only see it being used a lot like that. So can you see? So this is over state. When it's over, you are changing the style. And as you can see, some other things too are coming out based on the element you are moving on top are like that. So it all depends on what the site want to use, whether they want to use it or not, like that. So it all depends on you as a developer. As you can see this one too. So over, enter and there and you see the style change. What they are using is just over state that they are listening for like that. You can see this one too. Can you see that it's popping out based on the element you move? So over is what you are going to use to target. So you stay states. It's not a separate element. It's still the same element, but that element is undergoing a state change. So and when it's in that particular state, you want to do something based on that state. So let's see how we can do the over state. It's not that and over two, most of the time you are going to be using and selector because you don't just want to do it on all elements. You know that it's happening to a particular element, not just all of them. Because if you just come here, because this is how you do it when you're dealing with over states. So it is like this, over. So this is how to do the selector. But this one now is talking about, is not attached to any element. So which means it will happen on all the element. And what do we want to do? We just want to change the color to yellow like this. I want to change the background to red. So anytime you hover on any element, can you see that now it's happening on the body because I'm currently on the body, and you don't want it to happen like that. It's only when we go to a particular element you want this thing to happen. Then you can now use that your hand selector. So which means here now, anytime H2 now is over. So what do you want to do? You want this thing to happen. Nothing will happen to H2 until it's having this state. So it's when this state occur on that element, that's when it will trigger this your style. And when that state is not there again, then it will remove the stuff. So now if you go to, can you see, anytime you're on the H2, that's when now that state has been triggered. So you have the style. So CSS will see that the element is in that state, then to apply whatever CSS you want to use. And once you leave, then it doesn't work again. It doesn't work with any other element because we're only focusing on H2. And please don't forget, there is no space here. Once there is space, there is something else that you are saying. You're saying that everything that is inside H2. Can you see that it's not working with this one? Because now you are looking for elements that is inside H2, not the H2 itself. The only thing to target is what you have on the right. So, and we don't have any element. It's only H2 that we have. So that's why it's not working. So you need to use the and selector. So H2 and over. Not just H2, it must be over. And not just over too, it must be H2. The two condition must be like that condition must met, or the condition must be met before you can do the stuff like that. So now H1 2 will not work because we really focus. But what if I want to do it on H1 2? No, that's here now we cannot combine it. So now again too, I want it on H1 2. So H1 when it is over, or when H2 is over. So when your H2 is over or when your H1 is over, this is the style you want to apply. You see now, all this thing now, they're not coming together because that's how you'll be doing it. Not that you'll be using them. Most of the time, you have to combine them together to achieve what you want. Based on what you want to do on the page, we determine what you do here. You don't just call them anyhow. So it can happen on H1, it can happen on H2, but not any other heading. So this one I think is H3, this is 4, this is 6, this should be 5, 4, and this is 2 or so like that. And you have your 1 like this. So, and you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where's my 6? So on the page, and as you can see, it will only work on 2 and 1. But every other one doesn't work at all because we are not targeting them. Of course, and that's like you mentioned, like whatever you want to use it with, you mention it and it's going to apply. If I want to add button to the list, I just need to apply the stuff. But if it is just only button, all this one will not be there. So, but I want it to happen on H2, H1, and button. So if you go to where you have the button now, you see that it will work too. So you just mentioned it, but it will not work here. But even though this one look like button, we're not using button element to generate it. It's still input. So we talked about this in our last class because you can use input to generate button too. So if you go back to the form, you see that that first one is being generated through the impute. So as you can see, it is impute. But that's why it did not work, because the word you say you are looking for here is button, not impute. Alright. But if you want the two of them to work, this is another trick you can do now. So what you can just do here is to select based on that attribute. Since I want the two of them to work, so one way of doing it is to give them same class, target based on the class, or I can select them based on the same attribute. So here now, I'm looking for any element that have this attribute. This thing, I should change my keyboard again. So back to US. So submit like this. You can see now, I'm selecting based on attribute now, not based on type again. So select any element that have this attribute, but what do you want to do? It must be when it is over. So now if you save, so if you go there now, as you can see, it will now work for them. But instead of me doing it like this too, what I can just do is just to give them a particular class, maybe submit class like this. So now go back to their place and give them that class. So this impute and this one too. So give the two of them the class, which is going to be submit. Without this one, if I go back, you can see it's not working because it's looking for that element with class submit, but nothing like that on the page. So until I save like this, that's when it will not see them and it will see work. That's why I mentioned that for every crazy selector, there is always a simple ways of doing the same thing. So you can target two of them through their name by mentioning on different line, but I don't want to do that because that's repetition. So what I can now do here is to give them the same class or use another thing that I know that is common to two of them to select the stuff. So that's how this thing works there like that. So I see some other one that I mentioned, which is this. What if you want to select the first one or you want to select the second one and so forth like that? For example, now you see that on the page, we have a lot of OL and inside it we have the LI. What if we want to select the LI, or let me give it a class so that it will only focus on where I want it to work. So now I have this OL, so I'm going to give it a class items like this. So what did I want to do here? I want to select all the LI first. Let's select everything. So items, we have LI there. So let's give them background of red, color of yellow, and I want to do something here. So margin, so be what is margin? When we are dealing with property, you are going to know about it. But for now, I just want to use it. So saved, and as you can see, I have this stuff. But now it's not doing it because I don't want the one that is nested so that I don't get confused. Because you know another li too is nested inside it, so it just looks somehow. So let me remove it from here and put it where we are not having nested item, and that's why I'm giving class so that it doesn't work on all the OL. It will only work on the one that have that class. So saved, and now go back to the page, which will have it now. Yeah, so this is what I want. So like this. So as you can see, it's selecting all of them, because anytime you mention whatever stuff on this page, it doesn't give you the first one only or the second one or the third one. It will always give you all of them that it can find on that page. But what if you don't need all of them? I think this color is something else. Let me change it. So save this one, and I think this red. We talked more in the next class. We'll be talking about this color representation, like which is tomorrow. Should talk about color representation tomorrow, so that you see now I'm using different modes to represent the color. So we talked about all these modes tomorrow like that. So now what do I want to do? Let me even apply the spacing inside the box too. So all these things you are going to know about them once we get to the properties like that. So what is rem? What is pixels? Those are the stuff we are going to talk about tomorrow. All right, so now I have this stuff, and as you can see that it's selecting all of them, but I only want to select the first one, or I only want to select the last one, or if I want to, I can select the second one or the third one. So that's where all these attributes comes in here, which is this one down here. This selector comes in here. So the first, the last, or the end child. So with the type one, I'll be explaining it when we get to the time it will be useful. But for now, this is the one I will just explain. But they do the same thing. The difference between them is just the child and this type. But what is the difference between them? When we get to the time where I'm explaining this one, you're going to know about it. But for now, Let's explain this one. So now I'm not looking for all the li. I'm only looking for the first child, the first li that is inside it. So how do you talk to this li that is only the first one you want to select? So this is where we have this first child here. So what this one is saying is that we are only looking for the first li, like the li that is the first child inside it's that place. So if you are the first child here, then select it. But if you are not the first child, as you can see, it will not touch it. Since other one are not the first child in their parent, so nothing will happen to them. It's only the first one is going to select. So whatever the last one too is the same thing. Just use last child like this. So save, and as you can see, it's only the last one is going to. But there is nothing like second child because no, there is no way CSS can give you. You know that there is always first. You know, everybody know there is always first and there is always last. Even the first can be last because if it's just one item, that means it's the first and it's the last. But there's no way you know that there is second one or the third one. So you have to be the one to talk to CSS that there is actually second one there or third one that you're looking for and so forth like that. And that's where this one comes in, which is known as a nth child. So now inside the bracket, you mention the child that you're looking for. So that first and last is just a simplification of this one for the first element and the last element. So here now I can actually use this one too to select the first one. So whether you use first child or this one, it's still the same thing. Or if I need the second one now, you just mention 2. If I need the third one, I will just mention 3. If I need the fourth one, I will just mention 4. But you know that nothing will happen because CSS will look for the fourth one. But there is nothing like a fourth one on the screen, then nothing will happen. So you have to use it according to what is going on your page. But this thing is more than this. The thing is actually powerful. Like I can use it to iterate your element. If I want, I can use n here. So n behind the scene is just the same thing as you saying, okay, keep working, but the value of n, what's the value of n? It will keep changing it from 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth like that. So what is doing at the first time, n is 0. So that means that place is looking for the 0, 1, but no, that is not, it's not making sense because it only starts from 1. Then the next time n will change to 1. So that means it will select the first one. The next time n will change to, that's why you see that it's selecting all of them. But if I want, I can select all the odd number that we have on the page, which I can use 2n like this. No, this one shouldn't select. This one should select all the even number. So this one now, you know, the first time, you always start from 0. Or you even forget about 0 because we know that that one will not work. Because, but you can actually work because if I add n plus 1, you know, 0 plus 1, no, that's 1 the first time. So that's why you don't skip it sometime because it's always useful too. So here now, the n is going to be 0. That's 2 times 0. No, that's 0. It will not select anything. No, the next time n is going to be 1. So that's 2 times 1. So that means 2. The next time n is going to be 2. 2 times 2, you know, that's 4. So which means this one will only select all the odd, all the even number. You know, the first it is 2. When it is 1, you know, that's 2 times 1, that's 2. When it is 2, you know, that's 2 times 2, that's 4. When it is 3, you know, that's 2 times 3, you know, it will give you 6. The next time it is 4, 2, that's 8. So it's selecting all the even number like that. And if you save it now, as you can see, it's only the second one that's going to select. Let me create a list that have more item like this on the page so that we can see it. So let me create more of this stuff. So let me just duplicate them more and save. And as you can see now, it's only selecting all the even number. But if I want to select all the odd, you know, you just shift the number by adding 1 to it. You know, the first time it will be 2 times 0, that's 0, plus 1, you know, that's 1. Now the next time it will be 2 times 1, that's 2, then plus 1. So it will only shift it from even number to the odd number. So now it will start from the beginning and it will only focus on the odd. Or you can even create your own. Just know that n only start from this. Or CSS actually have a better way of selecting odd or even instead of you, because some of the property you want to be doing in CSS, it's no, some of them are constant or they are something that is something you always use a lot. So it's give us some text you can use to represent them. Just like the way we say first, the last, child, and whatever. So here too, I can just mention odd here. It will still work. So I don't need to specify the number. CSS have a predefined text for that same thing. Or if I want, I can just use even. And you're going to see a lot of this in later on too. Like that, like there's some text for them. Instead of you typing the normal stuff, what you just do is the text that CSS is using to represent some of these common stuff. For example, like the color now. So we have, if I said color here should be transparent. This transparent here is just a value behind the scene. But since it's something that you always use most of the time, instead of you typing that long stuff, you just say transparent. Transparent behind the scene is just this stuff here. So this is what transparent just means. So RGB here, zeros, 000, then you have this 0 here. That's transparent. So this text here now, this is what it's just going to do behind the scene for you. So and you're going to see a lot of them later on like that. So if I say it means there is no color, everything will be, you can see that it's working. So whether if I disable this one, it will still work because the two of them are doing the same thing like that. So but don't want this. So this is where we'll stop. So tomorrow there, we're going to be talking about the units in CSS because they are very important. Look at it there. What is this REM that I use here? What is this pixels that I use here? So we talked about it tomorrow. And at the same time, we're going to talk about the color representation there. So what are different ways that you can use to represent color? Because you are going to be seeing them, you are going to be seeing color in different form. So anytime you see it, any of this one, you already know what is going on, or you yourself can generate the stuff like that. So tomorrow, we're going to be talking about, where is it? I think I've prepared the, yeah. So we have this color representation and we have this unit and measurement, but I am going to combine the two of them together because it doesn't need to be separate class. So because we only talk about, what I only talk about is what you need now, not just bombarding you with a lot of things that you will not use right now, so that we can quickly get into design there like that. So tomorrow we focus, I'll prepare the text. I think this text here is still what I'll be using, so that will be all. Thank you.